to your first lesson on area, perimeter, and volume. In this lesson, we are looking at area basics. What is area? What are the units of area? And how to calculate area by counting squares. The first thing we want to look at is what is area? Area is a measurement of the size of the surface of a shape or an object. For example, area might be talked about in terms of the floor space of a house. So how big each room in your house is, your balcony, the parking spaces, these are all measured using area. Countries are measured using area. For example, the area of Mexico is 6 times larger than the area of Malaysia. You might also talk about area in terms of the area of floor you have spilled your chocolate milk over, and therefore the area your mum wishes for you to clean up. So area measures the size of the surface of a shape or an object. Next, we want to know what are the units of area. The most basic unit is the square centimetre. This is, if we think about a square that is 1 centimetre wide and 1 centimetre long. So this square would have an area of 1 centimetre squared. And we use the square units to show that it is a two-dimensional shape, not just a length. So for example, if each square on this rectangle represents 1 centimetre squared, what would be the area of this rectangle? Well, we can see there are 8 1 centimetre squared squares there. So we would say this has an area of 8 centimetres squared or 8 square centimetres. You will have both terms used. Next, we have the square millimetre. This is a square made up by 1 millimetre and 1 millimetre. So this is 1 millimetre squared. Now, what we want to know is how can we convert between square centimetres and square millimetres? What is their relationship? Well, we already know that 1 centimetre is the same as 10 millimetres. So if we think about the 1 centimetre line, it will have 10 millimetres. And this 1 centimetre line would be made up of 10 millimetres. So what that means is we should see something like this. 1 centimetre would be 10 millimetres long and then 10 millimetres long. And when we do that, we find that in a 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre square, there are 100 of these 100 of these 1 millimetre square blocks, which means that 100 millimetres squared is the same as 1 centimetre squared. Okay? So this is different to our normal lengths. Likewise, we've also got the square metre. This is a square made up by 1 metre by 1 metre. And again, we want to think about how to convert between the square metre and the square centimetre. And so, we can think about that as each 1 metre is 100 centimeters. So a 1 meter by 1 meter would be the same as 100 centimeters along and 100 centimeters down. And if we were to count up all of those boxes, it would be 100 times 100. So there are 10,000 centimeters squared in 1 meter squared. Now there are other units of area that can be used, and you might have a chance to look into some of these on your own, but these are the three basic ones that we will be focusing on. Next, we want to work out how to calculate area from square paper. So this is where our shapes will be overlaid on paper that already has squares on it. So for example, we have this shape B. It has been overlaid on some 1 by 1 centimeter squares. So each square is worth 1 centimeter squared. So now we can find out the total area of this shape by simply counting how many squares are filled in. We can see there are 6 squares that are completely filled in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And there are 2 squares that are half filled in with these triangles. So we have 6 holes plus 2 halves. We have 7 squares. So the area is 7 centimeters squared. Here we've got another shape. And in this case, we're going to say that each square is worth 1 millimeter squared. So we want to count up the number of squares. We can make this a little bit easier on ourselves by first splitting this. Now we're just going to count between the 2 different parts. Our first part will have 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Our next part, we can see it has 3 rows, and each row has got 6 squares in it. So it is 3 times 6, which is 18. So in total, we have 18 plus 8, 26 squares, so 26 millimeters squared. Now we can also use square paper to help us find the area of shapes that might be a bit more difficult, like this circle. Now there is a way to actually calculate the exact area of this circle, and as an extension task, some of you might want to look into this later. That'll be part of the questions later on. But we can estimate it by counting up all of the squares within it and looking at estimating how many of these partial squares exist. Now there's a little trick to this one. Here, each square is 1 centimeter squared. And instead of counting all of the squares in the shape, which could be a bit confusing, instead, what we are going to do is we're going to draw these lines around it. And I'm going to first work out for the entire square here, how many boxes are there. This square is 8 by 8, so there would be 64 boxes in the square. And now I'm going to subtract all of the empty boxes. So we need to find the area of the white space. Now, I'm going to count these 2 here as 1 and these 2 here as 1. There is also this little part here, here, and here. But for now, we're just going to include those in these 2 ones, which means we're going to estimate that these white space here becomes 1, 2, 3. And there are 4 of these spaces, and they are all the same. So the area of the white space will be 3 times 4, that's 12. And then we can subtract that away. So the total shaded area is approximately 64 minus 12, 52 centimeters squared. So we found the whole area. We then subtracted an estimate for the empty area, and we estimated that each of these was worth 3, and that gave us 52 centimeters squared. Now, if we used a formula to find the area, the real area of the circle is 50.24 centimeters squared. So we were pretty close, and that's a pretty good approximation for the area. The last thing we're going to look at is how to convert the units of area. So we looked at before that 100 millimeters squared was 1 centimeter squared, and 10,000 centimeters squared was 1 meter squared. So now let's try to convert 30 centimeters squared into meters squared. Now we know that 10,000 centimeters makes 1 meter. So to find out how many 30,000 makes, I need to divide that by 10,000. 30,000 divided by 10,000 is 3. Therefore, 30,000 centimeters squared is the same as 3 meters squared. Now let's try and convert 345 centimeters squared into millimeters squared. We know that 1 centimeter squared is the same as 100 millimeters squared. So now I need to multiply. So to do this, we need to multiply each of these centimeters squared by 100. So 345 times 100 is 34,500. So 345 centimeters squared is equal to 34,500 millimeters squared. We'll do one more now. Here, each square is worth 1 millimeter squared. Find the area in centimeters squared. So here we should first count up the number of squares. There are 3 whole squares and 3 half squares. So 3 plus 3 halves is 4.5. So the total area is 4.5 millimeters squared. I want to convert those millimeters squared into centimeters squared. So that here I need to divide by 100 because there are 100 millimeters squared for every 1 centimeter squared. So I divide by 100, 4.5 divided by 100. I'm going to move that decimal place to the left twice, and that's 0.045 or 0.045 centimeters squared. So to recap what we have learned in this lesson, area is the size of the surface of a shape. Some measurement units include square millimeters, mm squared, square centimeters, cm squared, square meters, m squared. You should see if you can find some other measurements for the units. Some other units of measurement, that are used in the real world. You can convert between units, but remember it is slightly different to when we convert length units. 1 centimeter squared is 100 millimeters squared. 1 meter squared is 10,000 centimeters squared. And if you want to challenge yourself, see if you can work out how many millimeters squared are in 1 meter squared. We also learned that if a shape is drawn on square paper, you can calculate the area by counting the squares. Thank you for joining us in the lesson today. You need to now go on and attempt the questions based on lesson